Discover the amazing fortune I hid until my daughter's wedding speech exposed my unexpected truth. John stood in his garage, the familiar smell of oil and metal wrapping around him like a worn blanket. It was a comforting space, the heart of his modest life as a mechanic and single father. But today, a gnawing anxiety dwelled beneath the surface. As he wiped grease from his hands, his thoughts spiraled around Emily, his daughter, his pride, her wedding day looming just hours away like a freight train barreling down the tracks. Each tick of the clock was a hammer, driving home the weight of expectations, both his and hers. What if he disappointed her? Their relationship was built on small moments, cozy evenings filled with laughter, late-night talks that swelled with love, but there was an undercurrent of secrets he had buried for too long. His father had been an inventor, a dreamer whose machines had never seen the light of day. John vowed he'd take a different path, one rooted in the tangible, the clatter of wrenches and the roar of engines. Still, every time Emily's excitement bubbled over about her upcoming marriage, a shadow whispered doubts in his ear. Was grease under his nails enough? He shunted the thought aside, focusing on the tasks in front of him. Each vehicle that rolled into his shop was a puzzle, and solving them brought him solace. But with every turn of the wrench, he felt an increasing urgency to shield Emily from the truth of his father's legacy. What would she think of him if she discovered the remarkable workshop full of failed inventions collecting dust? Would that inheritance overshadow the proud mechanic she knew he was? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the wedding hours away, his heart raced as he recalled Emily's giddy enthusiasm while planning this day. He had listened, nodding, urging her on, burying the restless ache clawing at his gut. If only she understood the complexity of their legacy, the pressure of concealment weighing him down. Today she would honor him in her speech, but how could he truly stand tall if she exposed the truth he had been guarding like gold buried in the back of his mind? As he stepped into the venue later, laughter and music filled the air, but John felt like an imposter. A figure loomed in the shadows, one from his past, an old friend turned rival whose bitter words haunted him, ready to wave a torch over the hidden artifacts of John's life. John clenched his fists, wrestling with panic. What would happen if the truth spilled forth? The very thought sent icy dread through his veins. The ceremony unfolded in waves of warmth and festivity, yet John's mind was a cyclone. He was teetering on the edge, trying to validate his existence as Emily stood before family and friends, her eyes sparkling with pride as she began to speak. But then, she shared moments he thought were sacred, unraveling a tightly wound thread. What had she unearthed? Fragments of a truth he feared would resound like a blaring alarm, echoing against his very identity. John's pulse quickened, suffocating the joyous atmosphere. He wasn't just a mechanic. He was a man haunted by a legacy he wished to protect. What lay beyond the veil of Emily's speech was uncertain, a storm brewing with swirling implications. His greatest fear loomed: what would happen when the truth of his past collided with the hopes for their future? John's stomach twisted as he fought to focus on Emily's words, but they became a blur, drowned out by the rising tide of his own thoughts. Panic danced at the edges of his consciousness, intertwining with the sentimentality of the moment. Caught in a whirlwind of emotions, he began to see faces in the crowd, friends, family, acquaintances, all turned towards Emily, listening intently. Yet he felt utterly disconnected, trapped behind an invisible wall, an observer in his own life. As his hands involuntarily gripped the edge of the chair, he clenched his jaw, wrestling with the ghost of his father's legacy. The specter of invention lingered over him like an unwelcome guest. Had he truly escaped that life, or had he simply been masking it? The moment lingered, amplifying his anxiety to a deafening roar. Would Emily's speech reveal the depths of her father's hidden reality? Each anecdote she shared seemed like a tether threatening to pull him into the abyss. His mind raced, desperately searching for a way to redirect the impending confrontation with the truth. Suddenly her words shifted. And my dad always encouraged me to pursue my dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. The crowd chuckled, reminiscing about their shared memories, yet John felt cold. Did she know what dreams had been suppressed beneath the weight of routine? Her face radiated with admiration, a mirror reflecting his hidden shame. The dichotomy struck him. She looked up to him, yet he felt unworthy of her gaze. John's heart sank with the realization that his decisions, fueled by a desire to provide, had paradoxically denied both him and Emily the chance to embrace the potential they could have explored together. All those times he'd been dismissive of inventing, shoving those dusty blueprints into the darkest corners of his mind, it was not the way he needed to raise her. Embers of that old passion flickered inside him, refusing to be extinguished despite years of neglect. As the speech continued, John stood uneasily, the urge to flee twinging at his limbs. Yet, in that moment of deep introspection, he knew retreating wouldn't offer relief. Maybe, just maybe, this day was not just Emily's but a tipping point for him too. If Emily was brave enough to expose herself in front of everyone, he had to gather the courage to confront his own truths. The thought of revealing his father's inventions stirred something within him, a defiance against years of repression. The mechanics of his world felt like chains, binding him to a path he once chose. A soft whisper emerged from the storm in his heart. You can reshape your legacy. Suddenly, the idea of returning to that hidden workshop, dust-laden as it might be, became less of a weight and more of a source of potential. He began to visualize the untouched machines, the ideas that waited in the darkness of his garage. Perhaps today, amid the celebration, was the moment to redefine himself not as just a mechanic, but as an innovator, a creator. Staring at Emily, who cheered and laughed with abandon, John made a silent vow. He would shake off the constraints, not only for himself but also for her. The old ambitions could once again breathe life. What if he channeled this energy into something greater, something he could share with his daughter? The thought crystallized in his mind as Emily smiled brightly, and finally he felt the jagged edges of his fears smooth slightly. The moment of truth was coming, but it wouldn't be just hers alone to face. It was time to dismantle the walls he built and embrace not only Emily's future but his own. As the last words of her speech echoed through the air, with the clinking of glasses inviting a toast, John felt the deliberate weight of his choices pressing heavily on his chest. The reckoning with his history loomed close. Would the legacy of invention be one of shame or one of pride? Would he take that first step into the light of potential or remain shrouded in the shadows of his insecurities? Each moment of elation was now threaded with tension, and a resolve to finally confront his past was forming within him. He could no longer be just a mechanic. He would strive to be the man Emily believed him to be. With the world momentarily quieting around him, he made his way toward the crowd. The air crackled with possibilities. The time had come to forge ahead, to unveil not only his truth but to stand before his daughter and announce a new beginning. He took a deep breath, ready to face the ghosts of his past, feeling within him the stirrings of a long-suppressed potential waiting to be unleashed. And as he stepped forward, the specter of his rivalry emerged into view, the smile on that familiar face not as friendly as he remembered. The true confrontation was at hand, and John's heart raced again. Would his proclamation of newfound vigor withstand the scrutiny of the past? John's footsteps faltered as he approached the crowd, where his rival Thomas added a jarring note to the otherwise jubilant atmosphere. The confidence in Thomas's eyes, once considered a mere annoyance, now felt like an impending storm. It was a face he had tried to forget, one that embodied a rivalry rooted in both envy and aspiration. "Look who decided to join us," Thomas called out, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The way he emphasized us sent a ripple through John's resolve. Was this man really here to witness his moment of rebirth or to dismantle it bit by bit? Suddenly, an urgency washed over him. It was now or never. Engaging in a social ecosystem that recognized him solely as a mechanic felt suffocating. He had been defined by that title, long lost in the monotonous rhythm of repairs and maintenance, disguising the once vivid dream of invention behind the rusted bolts and grease-stained hands. But Thomas and his unyielding charm had a knack for sowing doubt. As the crowd buzzed around them, John could almost feel the weight of their expectations pressing against his skin. In that moment, he realized that he was not only battling the specter of Thomas, but the years of his own inaction. "I've got something to say," he found himself answering, his voice steadier than he felt. The words hung in the air, and he felt the room shift. eyes turned towards him, drawn by the tremor of empowerment that he didn't know he had summoned. The warmth from Emily's earlier speech still lingered in his chest, fueling the fire in his gut. Thomas smirked, sizing him up with an arrogance that had always aggravated John. "Let us hear it then. Make it good," he taunted, feigning support while sharpening his words like knives. John met his gaze, refusing to yield. 4 years of missed opportunities and suppressed aspirations threatened to surface in his mind, and he had to push through. "I'm tired of hiding. Tired of blending into the background," he declared, daring to reach for clarity amid the chaos. Each word became a deliberate act of defiance against years spent shackling his own potential. A few heads nodded amongst the crowd, small yet significant gestures of support that anchored his mind. Perhaps they had sensed what lay beneath his facade all along, the inventor yearning to be seen, the dreamer desperate to breathe again. In that moment he saw Emily standing amidst the guests, an encouraging tilt of her head urging him forward. "I've designed inventions, dreams that were drowned out by everyday life. Today I'm finally acknowledging that part of me." The admission felt like a delicate thread unraveling, exposing layers of himself he had buried too deeply. However, Thomas chuckled, dismissing John's proclamation with a swift wave of his hand. "Inventions? That's cute. Have you forgotten they never went anywhere? You're just a mechanic, John." The sting of the words threatened to knock him off balance. Had the years of dismissing his ideas at home and in front of others come full circle? He had always watched Thomas race ahead with the accolades and respect he coveted, while John's own ingenuity lay dormant in the recesses of his garage. But rather than retreat into silence, a new clarity settled over him. The words formed in his mind: "Being a mechanic isn't all I am. I can be more." John turned to face his audience. "Maybe it's time for a comeback. I won't be defined by the past anymore. New projects are already beginning, and I want you all to be part of this journey." The conviction in his voice surprised him, drawing intrigued murmurs from the crowd. For the first time he felt empowered, no longer just standing on the sidelines, but transforming into the architect of his narrative, a narrative that invited curiosity and collaboration. He could feel the tide shifting. He was stirring the embers of the dreams he had once let go of. As the crowd reacted, he caught sight of Emily, her eyes shining with pride. He had ignited a spark within himself, but as he turned back to face Thomas, the rivalry ignited anew. What would this new trajectory entail? Would Thomas see him as a threat to disrupt his standing, or would he dismiss it outright? At that moment, a familiar dread reared its head, the fear of failure. But it was met with an equally intense desire to break free from the chains of his choices. With every heartbeat, the weight of expectation heightened. Could he truly reclaim his legacy without losing what little he had left? As Thomas stepped forward, a challenge flickering in his eye, John braced himself. The confrontation was only beginning, and he wouldn't allow the ghosts of his past to dictate his future any longer. He would rise, redefine existence, and share that battle with Emily. Whatever lay ahead, he was prepared to face it. Would that audacity be enough to claim victory against his greatest rival, and more importantly, against himself? Thomas stepped forward, fists clenched, ready to pounce on John's latest proclamation. The crowd sensed the tension, an electric pulse running through the air. John stood firm, a newfound resolve coursing through him, challenging not just Thomas but the limits he'd imposed on himself. "Think you're going to pull some magic trick out of your toolbox, John?" Thomas's voice dripped with condescension. "That you can just rebrand yourself from mechanic to inventor in a flash? The world doesn't work that way." John could feel the sting of those words as if Thomas were pricking a wound he thought had healed. But bolstered by Emily's earlier encouragement, he countered with the quiet fury of determination. "You're right. Doesn't work that way. But nothing worth doing ever comes easy, does it?" He allowed that statement to hang in the air, letting it settle among the curious onlookers. The shift in atmosphere galvanized John further, each second edging him closer to the edge of a new path. He thought of the countless ideas he had shelved, inventions collecting dust in the corners of his mind. He had a choice. Let Thomas diminish him or allow himself the space to grow. With a deliberate exhale, he added, "The journey is just as important as the destination. And I'm here to take that journey, to reconnect with who I really am. I could have kept quiet, stayed in the shadows, but I refuse to let anyone define me. Some murmurs of agreement surfaced from the crowd, emboldening John. He could feel his heart racing, and for the first time in years all those hours spent in his workshop felt valid. But the specter of doubt still hovered, threatening to undermine this moment. What if this is just another failure? Whispered the old John, but the new John countered. What if this is the beginning? Thomas, wasn't he about to relent? Very inspirational. But let us face it. Most inventions are just ideas that never get off the ground. I bet your dreams will vanish just like your last attempt at something ambitious. His eyes bored into John, an unabashed challenge waiting to be met. Instead of retreating once more, John felt the authentic mantle of a dreamer settle over him, heavy yet invigorating. Why not challenge that? Why not bring those ideas to life? With mentorship, collaboration, and your dishonesty as motivation, I can develop something that's not just functional but meaningful. John could see the intrigue igniting in the crowd, especially among the younger faces eager for something new. He thought about how inventions weren't simply objects. They were means to solve problems, to bring people together, and to share experiences like the one he had just faced. In that moment he realized he needed more than just a singular vision. He needed allies. I'm not just asking for support but for collaboration, for a chance to create something that matters. His free hand gestured toward Emily, who nodded vigorously, her own excitement palpable as he felt the tide within the audience shift. The heat behind his words ignited a different kind of fire inside him. He had not only declared his intent but had begun to take ownership of his abilities and dreams, understanding that failures were simply lessons in disguise, not endpoints. But with Thomas's challenging smirk still etched in his memory, he also recognized the stakes had dramatically risen. What would it take to turn this moment into a real opportunity? And what risks would he need to take to silence both Thomas's voice and his own self-doubt? With the former weight of his past lifting, he approached the future with eagerness and trepidation. His heart surged as he envisioned the potential partnerships, the workshops that could ignite his creations into reality. He could practically map out the first few steps of the journey ahead. But then a sudden thought struck a last, nagging uncertainty lingered in his mind. Did he truly have what it takes to pursue an undiscovered passion amid the chaos of existing responsibilities? Not just personally but professionally? Was he ready to confront the real implications of unveiling this version of himself to the world? As he locked eyes with Emily, her unwavering faith fueled his determination. But glimpses of doubt crept back in, uninvited. Their connection was pure, yet it brought forth the fear of how his new path would impact their lives. I'll show them, show us both, he thought. But the disquieting question shadowed him. Was declaring his ambitions enough to turn back the tide of envy, both from Thomas and his own inner critic? Determined yet knowing he was at a crossroads, John braced for the challenges ahead. It was time to turn theory into practice, but was the timing right? The nexus to claim his place as a creator loomed, but would he rise to the occasion or fall prey to old insecurities? As the crowd awaited his next move, John could feel the fabric of his future slipping through his fingers. The moments for action were at hand, yet uncertainty and urgency melded into a fragile balance, leaving him unsure of how he would proceed. Would he harness the opportunity just born from his struggles, or keep dwelling in doubt that Thomas so eagerly tried to amplify? The weight of the moment pressed heavily on John as he stood facing the crowd. This transitional juncture had charged his spirit, yet uncertainty knotted his stomach. A multitude of stifled voices buzzed around him, and in that chaos he sought a path forward. Each heartbeat resonated with the knowledge that his next action could redefine him. The question loomed. Would he embrace this newfound identity, or retreat back into comfortable obscurity? Enough with the hesitation, he thought, shaking off doubt like a stubborn shroud. The electric energy of the crowd provided a flicker of hope. He had always been a mechanic, adept at fixing things, but the uncertainty of stepping beyond that role was paralyzing. He envisioned the workshop where he felt most alive, tools neatly arranged, half-formed ideas waiting patiently on paper, yearning to break free. What if he could transform them beyond mere constructs of steel and plastic? Okay, John, he whispered to himself, allowing the mantra to strengthen his resolve. Think bigger. These words made the fear feel manageable. What if he began to draft a proposal for a community workshop? A place not just for inventing but for support, collaboration, and tangible creativity. He could facilitate discussions on innovative ideas emerging from everyday problems, inspiring others like himself to take the plunge. Rounding his thoughts back to Thomas, John redirected the potential of his confrontation. How could he leverage that negativity into a source of motivation? Thomas's skepticism pierced deeply yet so clearly illustrated the need for such a workshop. What if I could invite him to join? This outrageous thought was laced with potential, a challenge sent into the universe to shape him. That's it, he realized, waking up with a sense of urgency. His wheels started turning faster. John imagined the workshop space a place where accountability and mentorship would meld, where failures could be shared freely. He envisioned a roster of expertise lined up to fuel creativity. It needed a name, a beacon to draw in those like him, open to delving into innovation, casting aside the fear of judgment. The murmurs of the crowd faded into the background as his confidence grew. He could feel the corners of his mouth upturning as he formulated a pitch. Imagine a workshop where anyone could come, bearing their wild ideas and their struggles, no judgments, just collaboration. A space to breathe life into those ideas that Thomas said would never rise. With burgeoning excitement, John gestured, excitedly calling to Emily. Let us do this together. We can start with branding, garner support through social media, even host a launch event. We can create something meaningful. The blend of emotions surged within him. Anticipation and trepidation danced hand in hand, but now he was gripping the reins. But as plans began to take root, a familiar shadow cast itself across his aspirations. The specter of failure loomed large. What if he invested all this energy, only to watch it spiral down like so many dreams he had once harbored? This fear rapidly transformed into fuel for determination. Every great innovator faced rejection and doubters. The true embrace of personal growth lay in weathering that storm. Amidst the unpredictability, rise above it, he chanted internally, struggling against the dragging chains of his past mistakes. His internal dialogue grew fervent. This is not merely about the mechanics of inventing. It's about breaking down the barriers I've built around myself. Failure isn't a destination. It's a lesson, a stepping stone. The crowd's energy returned. Their whispering crescendo mirrored his rising motivation, each one a co-conspirator in potential collaboration. He was no longer bound to a solitary path. He could actively change the narrative. Each person in the crowd became not just a witness but a participant. He had the chance to redefine himself in relation to others, which felt exhilarating. The friction between Thomas's negativity and his burgeoning dream escalated, reaching a boiling point. The time had come to face my own doubts and the detractors openly, he thought. But what if the crowd reacted differently than he expected? What if they weren't ready to align with his vision? Chunking his impending vulnerability, John took a deep breath. This was about more than proving something to Thomas or anyone else. It was about rediscovering himself, posturing himself as the architect of his destiny. As the silence thickened around him, John felt mounting anticipation. Today wouldn't end in a whimper of uncertainty. It could flourish into an awakening of profound potential. He was standing at the very edge of a turning point, ready to leap into uncharted territory. With that decisive spark igniting his core, John raised his voice, ready to articulate a vision that not only galvanized himself but could light a path for others too. Let us bring these ideas to life together, he declared, eyes scanning the crowd for support. But would they follow or stand in silent judgment, crushed under the weight of his aspirations? The moment surged forward. An uncertainty morphed into the adrenaline of possibility. He could already sense the shift beginning, but what tests, what reckonings awaited him on this path ahead? The silence in the crowd was deafening, a stillness that clung to John's skin like humidity before a storm. He felt their scrutiny, their whispered doubts translating into a palpable pressure that threatened to crack his newfound resolve. His throat tightened, but he refused to cower. Instead, he planted his feet firmly on the ground and lifted his chin, embodying his vision, no matter how fragile it felt in this critical moment. I understand that many of you might be skeptical, he continued, voice steadying as he pushed through the discomfort. We're all grappling with our own doubts and failures. But imagine a space designed to transform that uncertainty into innovation. A place where we aren't just operators of tools but architects of ideas. Every word was a deliberate revelation of his intentions, and he could see signs of engagement stirring within the crowd. Some nodded, though others remained glued in place, uncertain. It left him pondering how deeply rooted their reservations went. Coming headfirst into this challenge, away from his identity of a mere mechanic, demanded not just courage from him but also an understanding of the people he was aspiring to engage. As his mind raced, John's heart propelled him forward. Drawing from his personal experiences of doubt and rejections, he continued to build bridges with his audience. Every failure I've encountered was not a dead end but an inflection point. Each misstep brought me closer to understanding what I was truly capable of. This workshop isn't just for the finished product. It's about the journey of creation. With each passing moment, he seized his fears and repurposed them into strength. He began mapping out what resources he could gather: a partnership with local organizations, tools donated by fellow mechanics, even the use of digital platforms for shared learning. He envisioned not a solitary path, but a labyrinth of interconnected possibilities. His previous insecurities about reaching out to others began to dissolve into threads of potential collaboration. Even if we struggle, John added, we will learn together. Let us document our experiences, celebrate progress regardless of speed. Let us make mistakes and learn from them as a community. At this moment, Thomas's skepticism swirled back to the forefront of his mind. Confronting him publicly had been initially daunting. His doubts were valid responses reflecting many in the crowd. John took a steadying breath, and rather than shrinking under the weight of Thomas's gaze, he chose to draw strength from it. Thomas, I admit I face uncertainties as we all do. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Will you join me in reimagining what it means to innovate? The palpable change in the crowd's energy was electric. Hesitant expressions began to soften, revealing brows lifting at the mere suggestion of collaboration. Suddenly, John's own words echoed loud in his mind, challenging the weight of Thomas's pessimism. Am I truly ready to become the leader I envision? To embrace my identity beyond my past? It became a pivotal moment not just in his pitch, but in his own understanding of self-worth. Leadership was not just flashy charisma. It was rooted in vulnerability, acceptance, and the willingness to take communal risks. Seeking collective reassurance, he called out, we can strategize, create timelines, gather feedback, and pivot when needed. If we are willing to face this together, there's nothing we can't build. As he finished, palpable hope radiated from those present. They were intrigued, and it ignited a flicker within him again. This wasn't merely about his professional aspirations. It was about breathing life into dormant ambitions for all involved. As murmurs grew into determined chatter, John sensed an undercurrent of momentum building around him. But in that wave of enthusiasm, a deeper ambiguity loomed. Could he navigate this new terrain without losing himself in the process? Would he be able to sustain the energy required as both innovator and mentor? Just then, Thomas's voice sliced through the crowd, loud and pointed. And what if you fail, John? What if this all falls apart? The room fell silent. All eyes shifted back to him in expectation, as if the outcome of this journey now rested firmly in his hands. In a critical moment of truth and belief, John's heart pounded violently, a warning of both renewed possibility and impending judgment. The reckoning had finally arrived, not just with Thomas but within himself. How would he respond? The weight of the room bore down on John as he contemplated Thomas's challenge. For a moment, all he could hear was the thudding pulse of his own heartbeat against the backdrop of unnerving silence. He'd made progress, transformed his vision into words, but the reality of vulnerability was an uneasy bedfellow to his burgeoning leadership. A palpable fear rooted itself in his chest. The very foundations he sought to build could just as easily crumble if he couldn't fortify his resolve with measured breath. He stepped away from the podium and approached Thomas, defiance taut in his posture. Failure is part of the process, Thomas. It's not the end, it's a teacher, he replied, his voice unwavering. What we've been doing hasn't been working, and it's time we acknowledge that together. If we don't risk failure, how can we expect to uncover our true potential? An amused glimmer crossed Thomas's face, but behind it lurked doubt. And if your idea leads to nothing? The question lingered in the air, deflating the burgeoning excitement that had begun to swell among some members of the crowd. Then we learn, John countered, his tone shifting to something more introspective. I've spent years immersed in mechanical fixes, solving immediate problems with short-term fixes. But each time I adapted a method or rewired a system, it was a reflection of growth. We have to give ourselves permission to fail and gather those lessons to build something better. The crowd began to react, their energy shifting as John's conviction began to bridge the remaining gap of skepticism. He could feel their sentiments writhing. Fear churned within them, but so did an awakening sense of hope. Look around, he encouraged, sweeping his arm to encompass them all. We share the same passion. What binds us is our desire to create, to innovate. Is it not worth the risk to find out what heights we can reach together? Encouragement began to ripple, breaking the tension as people began nodding heads, whispering to one another. John's heart surged. This was the moment he needed to fully embrace his role not just as an aspirant leader, but as a catalyst for change. Yet beneath this palpable hope stirred a simmering anxiety. Could he truly guide them through potential pitfalls? What if the efforts led to more fragmentation rather than unity? He took a breath, resolutely anchoring his thoughts. Let us set our first milestone, he said, emboldening his tone. Let us return here in a week with ideas on how to contribute our skills. Allow me the chance to facilitate, to listen to each of you. I promise if we fail it will be together, but I believe we can succeed. The crowd began murmuring again, this time infused with a spark of collective determination. But within John, the specter of doubt remained a dark shadow that asked if he was capable of holding the weight of responsibility. Success was not just about innovative ideas. It was about guiding others through their own uncertainties. As he considered the hurdles ahead, John felt a new sense of resolve. Every moment of fear could be reframed as a step toward clarity. He reflected on his nurturing instincts, the patience he developed while mentoring younger mechanics, and how that same tenacity could underpin his leadership. This newfound humility, he realized, would serve as the backbone to his mission, embracing both triumph and failure. Each experience he gathered, every collaboration that blossomed, would carve pathways for growth not just for him but for everyone involved. As he looked back at Thomas, their gazes locked in silent accord. Uncertainty gave way to ambition. But an internal question churned: how would he manage when setbacks emerged? Could he maintain the clarity of the vision amid adversity? With the crowd now buzzing with conversation and ideas, the reality of leadership felt tangible yet daunting, a labyrinth filled with both promise and peril. He had ignited a fire, yet how long could he fan the flames without getting burned? As he prepared to leave the podium and invite individual conversations, a disturbance in the back of the room drew his attention. A figure emerging from the shadows made the air stand still. A former mentor, an outlier who held pieces of John's past that could redefine his journey. What did this unexpected encounter mean for the future he dared to dream? John stepped from behind the podium, his heart still racing in the aftermath of his impassioned speech. He caught sight of the figure moving forward, the familiar outline igniting a mixture of nostalgia and unease. The mentor had once been a guiding force in John's life, a figure whose approval had fueled his early ambitions, but whose absence had left a gaping void. David, he said, forcing the name into the open. The room seemed to shrink as John remembered the lessons imparted. How to embrace setbacks with grace, how to harness fear as a catalyst for change. But now, the distance between them felt insurmountable. John's aspirations were tempered with the specter of past disappointments. John, David responded, a hint of surprise mingled with recognition. I didn't expect to see you here taking charge like this. John managed a nod, but the warmth of the greeting was tainted by the weight of unspoken words. What brings you back? He sought direction in the exchange, desperately wanting affirmation yet fearing criticism more than anything. I heard about your meeting with the staff, David replied, his gaze steady, unwavering. You're stepping into a leadership role, it seems. That's quite a shift from the projects I remember you handling. And I'm sure you have thoughts on that, John said, the apprehension creeping back in, an echo of their previous discussions. When you left, you made it clear that my approach was flawed. David sighed, a gesture laced with understanding. You're right. I didn't handle my exit well. That's something I've reflected on. But let us be clear. Leadership requires more than just mechanics and a grasp of processes. It's about understanding people, their fears, their motivations. The word struck John deeply. Here lay the crux of his challenge. Could he truly engage with his colleagues on that level? He shaped his environment for efficiency, but had yet to address the emotional landscape intertwined within it. "Do you think I can handle it?" The honesty in his question startled even himself. David's expression softened, made astute by experience. "Handling it requires vulnerability, John. Something you seem to have grasped during your speech. That courage is vital. But don't underestimate the comfort of having someone to lean on. Will you let me help?" As John contemplated the offer, visions of past failures loomed. He had spent years striving to emerge from David's shadow, determined to carve his own path. But the urgency of his current situation mandated an openness to support. "Why should I trust you?" John questioned, his words firm but fragile. "Because I see the potential in you, John. You're standing on the edge of an evolution, one that could benefit from mentorship rather than isolation. But remember, trust is a two-way street. You'll need to let go of the fear that clings to you." In that moment, John felt as though the room expanded. The pulse of his heartbeat slowed, grounding him within the surreal interaction. David's offer felt like a lifeline amid his swirling uncertainties. Could he merge his newfound leadership ambitions with this opportunity for personal growth? "Let us collaborate," John finally said, a tentative note of hope in his voice. "Great," David beamed, the sincerity in his smile bridging gaps long left untouched. "But John, I need to warn you, there will be conversations that unearth discomfort. You'll need to face your past if you want to shape a different future." A chill raced down John's spine. The journey forward seemed increasingly clear, yet fraught with the complexities of reconciling his past and forging a new identity that embraced both strength and vulnerability. As their conversation deepened, he realized they would not just discuss strategies. They would unearth buried fears, confronting the specters of yesterday. Could he truly emerge transformed and resilient from these exchanges? What truths awaited him in uncharted territory? The weight of possibility pressed against him. A sudden noise drew his attention, a slight movement at the door as someone entered the room. A distraction that momentarily shifted the focus. But the presence was both intriguing and troubling, setting the stage for another revelation. What was coming and how would he respond? John turned towards the door, his thoughts still tangled in uncertainty. The figure that stepped in was unmistakable Samantha, a former colleague whose quiet determination had always pushed him to excel. She looked equally surprised but quickly masked it with a supportive smile. "John," she said softly, her voice cutting through the emotional haze. "I didn't expect to see you here. Is everything all right?" "Yeah, just catching up with an old friend," John replied, gesturing toward David, who nodded in acknowledgement. Samantha stepped closer, her presence a comforting reminder of the collaborative environment he had always sought to foster. "I heard about the new role. I genuinely think you'll be great at it. You've always understood the project's intricacies." But as her words washed over him, John felt the familiar pull of self-doubt tightening in his chest. While Samantha admired his technical skills, could she see the other dangers lurking below the surface? His fear of failure, the shadows of past mistakes that had almost eclipsed his confidence. David's earlier insights echoed in his mind, a challenge to move beyond the metrics of success and into the more labyrinthine world of interpersonal dynamics. "Thanks, Samantha. I appreciate it," he managed, even as he wrestled with the notion of proving himself worthy once again. "Just remember, it's okay to reach out for help. I know how you operate, often thinking you have to tackle everything alone," she said, her gaze probing but gentle. "You were a fantastic team player once. Don't lose that just because you're stepping up." Her words hung in the air, a mix of encouragement and gentle prodding that pierced through the armor he had built against vulnerability. How could he abandon the solitary path he had forged out of fear? The essence of collaboration, something he deeply valued, seemed to slip through his fingers whenever he felt the pressure mounting. "I've been thinking a lot about what leadership really means," John admitted, frustration creeping into his voice. "It's more than just making decisions, isn't it? It's about facing fears and guiding others." "Exactly," Samantha nodded, her eyes brightening. "And you've got this. Just remember, were any of us perfect when we first started? No. We grew by relying on each other." As she spoke, John felt a glimmer of hope ignite within him. Could he redefine his path by accepting that leadership was a shared journey? Might the very act of opening himself up to others be a turning point, allowing him to confront his challenges rather than evade them? He glanced at David, who appeared to be assessing the interaction, an approving smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. It dawned on John that mentoring wasn't just about learning to take on the mantle of leadership. It was about embracing both accountability and fellowship. "I guess I have a lot to learn, don't I?" John said, determination spilling into his tone. "Always," Samantha replied, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "But the most important part is what we do with those lessons. Having an open heart and mind matters far more than pure skills." As the trio engaged in deeper conversation, John could feel the burgeoning clarity around his purpose. Amid the fragments of self-doubt, a new understanding began to crystallize. Growth was not merely the act of declining from bitterness or fear. It was a leap into vulnerability, embracing the imperfections of oneself and others. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The door creaked open again, and in walked a man dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his air crisp and commanding. John felt a shiver of recognition. Brad, a recent hire with a reputation for being both ambitious and sharply critical. John, the newcomer, greeted, his voice cutting through the camaraderie they had built. "Got a minute? We need to talk about your approach to the upcoming project. It needs clarity, and frankly, I'm not sure you're up to it." The sudden challenge hung in the atmosphere, a stark reminder of the obstacles ahead. Would he rise to meet this confrontation, harnessing the support surrounding him? Or would he retreat, succumbing once again to self-doubt? A wave of tension surged within John as he faced Brad, the urge to prove himself surging stronger than ever. The moment had arrived, the true test of his development awaited. What strategies would he employ to navigate this volatile exchange? The question lingered, propelling him toward an uncertain, pivotal confrontation. John stood at the center of the gathering, the air thick with anticipation as he faced Brad's challenge. Emotions swirled within him: doubt, fear, but beneath it all, a burgeoning sense of purpose. Today was not just about asserting himself. It was the moment he would define his journey, transforming the stakes into opportunities. "Of course, let us talk," John began, his voice steady despite the tremor beneath. He could feel the supportive presence of David and Samantha close by, a reassuring reminder that he didn't have to face this alone. Bracing himself, he thought back to everything he had overcome: the fears, the doubts, the shadows of his past. Each had led him to this pivot point, a chance not merely to respond but to embody the leader he aspired to become. Brad's expression was one of skepticism, arms crossed defiantly as he scrutinized John's every word. "Your approach lacks clarity and focus. We need a vision that's straightforward if we want results." The insinuation pressed down on John like a weight he had long carried. But the iron resolve forged from Emily's wedding and the flood of supportive connections coursing through him offered robust resistance. "I understand your concern, Brad," John replied, allowing a moment of deliberate pause. "But I invite you to reconsider the potential of what we can accomplish together as a team, rather than a series of disjointed efforts." His thoughts flowed outward, no longer locked inside the confines of his fear. "The beauty of our new project lies in collaboration," he continued, gathering momentum. "Instead of focusing solely on the end result, we can create a framework that opens dialogue, allowing every member to bring their expertise to the table." He noticed nods from those in the crowd, a validation he hadn't felt before. A flicker of confidence ignited, surging to life in direct contrast to the doubt that usually clung to his conversations. Brad raised an eyebrow. "So you expect us to spare time on discussing ideas rather than driving results?" "No. I'm saying that incorporating everyone's insights transforms our final product," John countered, his tone becoming even more inclusive. "Leaning into our collective experience can ignite innovative solutions we never anticipated." As he spoke, John visualized not just the workshop, but the potential it held to foster an environment where failures could morph into valuable lessons, stimulating creativity rather than stifling it. "Let me put it another way," he proposed, eyes flitting between his audience. "Imagine rolling out a project that isn't just about functionality, but about creating a community that supports innovation. We can refine ideas together, building upon the strengths of everyone around us." The crowd murmured, an excited energy pulsing through the space like a vibrant current. It reinforced his intentions: he was building bridges, not walls. Even as Brad's skepticism still simmered, the room had shifted, inviting possibilities that hadn't been there moments before. The seeds of doubt had begun to sprout into curiosity. John turned back to Brad, leaning in as if sharing a genuine conversation. I know we all face challenges. My goal is to bridge those experiences and make them part of our framework, to show that success is just as much about the journey as it is about the destination. The firmness in his voice surprised him, but as he spoke, he felt the shadows of his insecurities begin to recede. He was no longer just a mechanic or a man haunted by the burdens of his father's legacy. He was a collaborator, an innovator, and a leader redefining what success could look like. Brad hesitated, his expression softening just a fraction. You believe that collaboration can lead us to succeed? Yes, John replied, feeling a newfound strength surging through him. Not just success in a project but growth as individuals and a team. Let us create an environment where we can share ideas, face setbacks, and learn together. Samantha stepped forward. We're an interdisciplinary team. Every skill set can enhance our output. The dynamics change when we embrace diverse opinions. Caught off guard by her interjection, John felt a swell of gratitude. It hit him this wasn't just about asserting himself as a leader. It was about fostering a shared vision, building alliances, and redefining their trajectory moving forward. By embracing vulnerability, he could inspire his team to explore their potential too. All right, Brad conceded slowly, arms unfolding, his brows lifting in consideration. Let us lay the groundwork together. If we're going to make this work, it'll take all of us buying into this vision. That feeling of validation sparked a wave of applause in the room. John smiled, basking in the crescendo of hope. He realized now that leadership wasn't merely a solitary pursuit. It was about eliciting the strengths of those around him, embracing a unified purpose, and redirecting their collective energy towards progress. That pivotal moment in his journey had changed everything. He had faced the ghosts of his past and emerged not just as John the mechanic, but as John the innovator and leader. As conversations erupted all around them, John stood vigilant, ready to wield this opportunity for growth and transformation. The haunting specters of his father's legacy were replaced by a sense of purpose as a creator and collaborator in not just inventing the future, but living it too. He turned to David and Samantha, their supportive grins reflecting everything he had aimed to achieve not just for himself, but as cherished connections he would rely upon moving forward. Together they would not just build inventions but nurture resilience, redefine failures, and forge a future filled with possibility. John breathed deeply, feeling a rush of exhilaration and clarity. With this newfound clarity, grounded in collaboration and collective strength, they were ready to take the first step into redefining what success truly meant. Now was the moment to put dreams into action. Drawing a breath, John shared a resolute smile. Let us get to work. The cheers erupted, and in that moment, he understood that he was not merely stepping into his father's shoes but carving a future of his own, a legacy built on community, innovation, and the understanding that together, they would truly conquer the impossible. Join me in this journey. You need to subscribe now to embark on more transformative journeys. This is the moment to show your support and be part of a community dedicated to growth and innovation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread the word about the power of collective endeavor. Comment your reactions and theories about John's journey, and what dreams you want to pursue next. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, and be inspired to transform their struggles into success. Don't wait even one more second, join us now.